Okay, we'll make a start. I just want to say thank you all for coming tonight. It's a Monday, not the greatest day to run an event for some, I'm sure, after a busy weekend, but thanks for making the effort. I just wanted to quickly introduce I'm Sean Clemens, I work for Vicent. If you're not familiar with tonight's format, we've got an awesome speaker from Acodus who's also a co-organizer like myself. We've got James in the back who's another co-organizer, so reach out to us if you ever are keen to present or have any questions about what we run on a monthly basis. I've got just show of hands. Is anyone first time coming to one of these events? Wow, that's pretty cool. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Paul, for making this happen. That's brilliant. We can get new faces to the event. All right, so a little bit about Paul. So Paul Costello is our speaker tonight. Paul has previously worked at Sun Microsystems. He was that go-to guy helping fix anything from hardware, networking, and infrastructure. And then he's moved across to Modus and now Acodus. I think you said 15 years? Yeah. More in the project management space. Basically, I guess, overseeing everyone else doing the work and doing a good job. And I asked Paul just for a little bit about Paul's, as an icebreaker, if you were to go and chat to him. He was born and bred in WA. There's not many folk that I've met that are actually from Perth, so it's pretty cool. He has done his working holiday in London, which I can relate because I came from London before I moved here. He loves photography. He's got some wonderful children who are all grown up now, and he has an Instagram account, which I don't have. So he's still hip with the cool kids. All right, so I think that's a good enough intro. I think it is. We'll hand you over, Paul. Thanks for taking us through Oracle.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Okay, so we'll jump straight in. I'll refer to, so whilst I won't go through an actual example of how we've done a migration, what I will do is reference when I've done one. So we did do one very similar, migrated from an on-premises in a data centre somewhere in Perth to AWS. The customer did have existing AWS infrastructure, so they sort of knew pretty much what they were in for. But there's a few little gotchas that I'll mention as we go along. So, and yeah, if you've got any questions, stick your hand up. I'll try and see if I can answer them. And there'll also be some questions at the end as well. Okay, right. So we're going to go through the migration strategy, the 3 migration approaches that most people use, some key planning steps, and some recommendations. Coming from a project management perspective, planning. Planning is everything with any sort of migration, whether it's an Oracle migration, whether it's a workload from on-premises into the cloud, anything, any migration work you do, you've got a plan for. And I think you'll see some of the things that they'll talk about in here, or that I've got in here. Why do we want to migrate Oracle to AWS? There's lots and lots of different reasons. Going to RDS is probably the biggest one as far as cost reduction through managed services. It also gives the ability to scale it and to alter performance. So, for example, if you've got, if you're running on RDS or even running on an EC2, you can scale it up or scale it down. Whereas if you've got something on premises, you've got hardware that you've got to work out, we've got to have this the biggest the performance that we need. So even if you've only got one day a year, you need to have the performance set at that level. You can't cut it down and then bring it up at the last minute. So there's lots and lots of, with people that had Oracle running on databases on their own hardware, it meant that they had a lot of times where the hardware's just sitting there ticking over, doing very little. So scalability and performance can be a very big driver to get off that sort of equipment. Enhanced security and compliance, particularly if you've got sensitive data, it's a lot easier to manage under AWS because they're looking after physical security. Sure, data centers will look after that as well, but the compliance aspect is a whole lot easier to manage when you're in AWS and you've got access to lots of different tools. Access to cloud-native features like auto-scaling, like S3 storage, all those sorts of things makes a huge difference rather than going and saying, oh, I need to buy another array of disks because we're running out of storage and I'm at 90%. Oh, but it takes 3 months for those to come in from overseas. No, just instant storage is there. And reduced operational overhead. So because you have this ability to scale up and down, it means that you can just change the way that you respond to any spikes, change the way you respond to sales or whatever the application is that's using this big database. We'll go through 3 migration strategies. Rehosting, and I had a question earlier around this. Lift and shift, we'll call it, rather than rehosting. Minimal changes, easiest thing to do. Replatforming, database engine change, and re-architecting, refactoring it, because there might be a better way that you want to present that data. So rehosting, migrating an Oracle database to RDS, for example. You can keep the existing database as is. You don't need to change the structure of anything. You can maintain current configuration. You can have, it's the fastest migration approach, and certainly that's the way that we did it in the example. It's also the safest way because if you're migrating like for like, the only thing you have to worry about, and this will get picked up in another slide forward, the only thing you have to worry about is any differences that aren't covered in RDS. Whereas if you're trying to go to a different database or a different platform, it creates all sorts of potential issues. So keep it simple, get it up and running, and make sure that, particularly if it's a critical database, that you've got it working first before you decide to do potentially the other few options. These are the services that you can use for it. RDS, of course, we've mentioned. Application migration service is a way that it actually installs an agent in your environment, and you can actually migrate applications as well. That's a big commitment. That's if you want to migrate everything in your whole data center off. But what we'll mention a number of times is the database migration service, DMS. That allows you to migrate the data and schema to a supported database engine like RDS in a number of different ways that it's very flexible and very good to use. Strategy 2, replatforming. So this is where you're changing the engine. It has moderate application changes. If you've got an application that's using that database, there might be some slight changes to the way that you're using it. It might still be SQL, but there might be different ways that you can do it. There are advantages to it, of course. If you move away from Oracle, it means it doesn't cost as much. It also gives you a bit more flexibility, particularly if you're going to things like Aurora. And it gives you much better cloud integration. It means that you aren't stuck using those Oracle commands or whatever to query the database that you've used forever. You can actually migrate it to something that's newer and better and a lot easier to use. These are some of the tools that you can use. As I said before, DMS handles heterogeneous migrations, great word. Does data type mapping and does allow for continuous replication during migration. This is important if you've got big databases, because the last thing you want to do is have a very long window interrupting your business. You want to try and get that data off there as quick as you can, or with the least amount of interruptions to your business, which is running on that database. The other thing that you can use if you're changing to a different target database is Schema Conversion Tool. It does support Postgres, MySQL, Aurora, and it identifies the conversion challenges that you'll need to look at. As I said before, replatforming is something that we considered when we were doing the work with the migration, but we decided that the safest thing to do was the rehosting first, get it onto RDS, and then we could look at the way that that database was being used and then decide on, well, that means we could re-platform if we wanted to, but we've got everything working here. So if we wanted to, we can just stand up another instance, a replica, for example, and bring that up to speed, see how it goes, move it across to something like Aurora, see what savings we get, and then it becomes very easy to go back to the business and say, look, we've got a business case here, says we should go to Aurora. Re-architecting. This one's not for the meek. There's significant application of database changes. You would want to do this only if you really need to do it, or that if it's going to really make your business different. Some people look at this particularly for things like Redshift, where you've got a data warehouse solution, and utilising all the things that you can get from a data warehouse. And so usually in, or a lake house, or whatever you want to call it, there's lots of different names for them these days. And usually it's not just your database, it's usually a number of other databases that are probably going into that warehouse. It mentions Aurora there, mainly because you can start using not just the compatible versions, but also start looking at the different features that you get in Aurora and Postgres, so that you can re-architect some of that. But it certainly means that you have to look at what's your underlying platform? What's your application need to do? Can you easily change that? And that becomes a whole different argument. Simple is easy, complexity is difficult. So, if you're planning to do a migration, I would definitely follow this approach. Assess what your current environment is. It's really, really important to have a look at the database size, because if it's a very large database, a terabyte, couple of terabytes, you got to think, well, how am I going to get that up into AWS? Is it so big that I've got to get a couple of snowballs or a snowmobile to basically come in and plug that into the database? Or is there another way that I can do it? And also its complexity. Is there a lot of stored procedures? Is there a lot of special custom code? Or is it using something like Oracle's special features that are only in Oracle and not in RDS? So doing that right from the get-go is really, really important, because you just got to be caught between a rock and a hard place if you go halfway down the project and then realise that, oh, that feature isn't supported in RDS. Application dependency mapping means that if you're changing the interface at all, is that still going to be consistent? Is everything going to still work if you're changing the way the connections work? Compliance and security requirements. Performance baseline first. You're usually doing a migration for a particular reason. It's either to, as I said before, some of those features that we looked at, better performance, better cost, all those things. So you want to make sure that you've baselined what that performance is, because once you've done the migration, you've got to be going, let's have a look at this compared to the baseline. Is this performing the way that I want it to? Compliance and security requirements. This is one that often gets a little bit missed. Compliance, we didn't really have any issues with. It was more of security, and that is that there were certain firewalls and certain connections that we knew about, and there were some connections that we didn't know about. And so that caught us out a little bit. It didn't stop us, but it slowed us down, and we had to then work out how we're going to do those connections. Cost analysis and ROI. If you're doing this from the beginning, it means that you've got an understanding of when putting too much into a project is identifiable. Like if you've worked out that it's got to be $200,000 and 6 months down the track, you've already spent $600,000. You've got to have people chasing after you. And finally, there's lots of different tools. AWS Application Discovery Service is one of those migration tools that looks at all of the application. And that's on the AWS Migration Hub if you want to have a look at that. There's lots and lots of documentation that AWS has around migrations, really informative. Planning. This is the key. Work out what migration strategy you're going to use. So you just got to, the easiest one, as I said, lift and shift. Just go from Oracle to Oracle. Don't try and change anything. Just get it up and running on the target in AWS. Work out what your timeline and resource allocation is. So what you can do is if you're an Oracle customer, you know that every year they're going to come back with a handout to say, we'd like a lot of money, please. So if you coincide the project with 2 months before that renewal, it's all moved to AWS, you've got to be happy people. And it's going to help pay for the cost of the project. Risk assessment and mitigation. As I said before, there are sometimes little things that can catch us out, whether it be network, whether it be little simple things, a feature that's not supported, or just something to do with the way that the structure that has been used for 10 years or something that no one knew about, but suddenly you've uncovered it because you've got all the processes there. And finally, rollback procedures are really, really important because you don't want to have everything up in the cloud and then suddenly realise that you can't go back. And testing strategy, pretty basic project management type stuff. And you usually deliver a migration plan, a resource allocation and a timeline. That's usually done pretty early on. And if you can do that, particularly after looking at the complexity of your target, complexity of your source, and whether you can do that in AWS, then it's got to be sweet. It doesn't mean that it'll run perfectly, but it'll be able to run in a controlled way that if you have any issues, you've got a pretty good idea of where they would be, rather than going, I don't know what's going on. Preparation. So of course, we were lucky because we actually had an existing AWS account in region. We had VPC and networking configured, so it was fairly straightforward. It still took time to push all that data up though, so you've got to allow for that in your planning. We had certain IAM roles and security policies, but as I mentioned before, we did get caught on a couple of those. Mr. Scott remembers some of that, I think. And target the database instance creation. How am I going to build this? Do I need it exactly the same size? Do I need it bigger? Do I need it smaller than the current one we have? And finally, have backup and recovery procedures. Of course, with RDS, you can automate that and everything's all sweet. So yeah, just plan. The migration itself, schema conversion, if applicable, as we saw before, if there's a change if you're going to a slightly different version of SQL for that particular database, then you'll may need to do that. Using AWS TMS, big difference. Continuous data replication, if you can do it, is great. If it means that you can reduce the size of interruption to your main business on that database. Application configuration updates. So in most cases, you haven't just got a database standing there doing nothing. It's actually running an application, or an application's using that database. So it means that you can understand how that application is going to work inside AWS? Is it something that you've got to change around? And finally, performance monitoring. Once you've done that migration, you want to make sure that you're doing performance management right from the get-go. There's one instance that I came across where they were saying that you should do it for 3 months after you've done the migration, because there could be things that happen at the end of the month that you may not know about. Cutover activities. Final data synchronization, that's always a happy time for projects. Making sure that all your DNS connection strings and updates are on track and in where they need to be. Application restart and validation. From the old days of Sun, one of the biggest things was if you're going to move stuff, make sure you shut it down and restart it first so that there's nothing hiding there and it comes up again. Performance verification. If you've got an idea of how it's performing, that baseline, you can see how it's going to perform on the new hardware or the new RDS, whatever way that you're going to monitor it, and making sure that you've got that rollback plan there in case worst scenario, you can't get everything communicating with the internet, whatever, you can still fall back to that. Validation and testing. So functional testing is pretty much a given. Performance benchmarking, as I said before, if you know what it can do or how it performed where it was, and you've got that really well worked out, then you can easily benchmark it on the new on the RDS instance. Check out the data integrity. There's a lot of little traps in that because particularly if you're using something like DMS, you've got to make sure that it's migrating all that data across, all that information that it needs is coming across and it's coming into the right way and format. You've got user acceptance testing. That's pretty much a given, making sure that it's still performing the way it should be. And then finally, updating the documentation. Post-migration, I was going to change this to just optimization, but I've got costs there. Right-sizing instances based on workload. So as I said before, one of the biggest challenges with having on-premise hardware, is having it scale up and down if you need to. If you're right-sizing it and you've got it worked out and you've monitored it and you're going, look, we can reduce the size of this database, which will save us $10,000, whatever, then that's perfect. Using reserved instances for predictable workloads. RDS is a predictable workload. If you're not using reserved instances, then you're spending a lot of money. Automated scaling for variable demand, if you can do that, that's good, particularly if your application can also allow it. Regular cost monitoring and optimization, that should be an ongoing process because, yeah, once you're on AWS, it's very easy to do. There's lots and lots of different tools that you can do and log just to make sure, and there's lots of automation that can help you with that. And having lifecycle policies for backup retention and data as well, because there might be some data on your database that's 10 years old and you don't really need anymore and it can save a lot of space. You can easily just push it off into Glacier or whatever you need to, and therefore bring back some of the storage that you need. Recommendations. Starting with a comprehensive assessment of the environments. As I've got there, both the current environment and the requirements of what your target is. Making sure that if you've got an idea of what the return on investment is, making sure that it's not going over that you've worked out how much it's costing you on site, what's it going to cost in the cloud, does that make sense, do you proceed forward? Consider a pilot migration for validation. I can't remember if we did a pilot. I thought we might have. But if you can, that's fantastic because then you can get used to using things like DMS. You can get a good understanding of the way that the Oracle will perform in AWS. engage either a professional services or a trusted AWS partner like us, particularly if you've done nothing like this before. Lots of information that I've read is basically saying this is not for the faint-hearted. If you're doing a lift and shift, that's great. If you're doing anything more complex than that, then there could be some big traps in there that'll cost you a lot of money. The other thing that we chose to do, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, is you can go to, for example, we went from Oracle on-premises into RDS. You could then go to another platform if you wanted that would then save you a lot of Oracle licensing costs. But it's a lot easier to do that once you've got everything in AWS than trying to just go straight into that platform. Establish monitoring and alerting. Yep, absolutely essential. And plan for ongoing optimization. There's all different ways that you can optimize, whether it's RDS itself or the application, whatever the application is running on. It could be a new instance type out. There could be lots of different things that you might look at and go, actually, if we move them on there, that might give us an advantage. And there's questions. Is that a record? Lots of questions. Come on. Yes.
What is the cost difference of the licensing when you do just lift and shift straight up? Is there actually a difference, or is it?
Lift and shift. So you mean move into RDS or just move into EC2 instances running Oracle?
Both.
So EC2 instances running Oracle is a trap, and it's a trap set by Oracle. If you are really good at reading contracts, have a look at your Oracle license and look at the way that it's set up. If it's an older sort of contract, then it might be a little different, but they don't really recognise virtualisation. That always comes with an extra cost. If you go to something like RDS, you can work out exactly how much that's going to cost from the get-go, and you don't have to worry about reporting back to Oracle every year when you do a renewal on that license that you've got.
Specifically, Oracle don't recognise on any cloud provider Hyper-threading.
Yeah.
That is an additional core, so you can effectively look at Oracle core count, just double it to go straight to EC2.
Yeah.
On EC2, if you are doing a lift and shift migration, direct like dead lift and shift to EC2, look into using the CPU control features to reduce the number of cores that you can present. You can pick any instance like you like, and reduce the amount of cores presented to that instance at the hypervisor level, and that does reduce your licensing risk to Oracle.
Yep.
But being on a straight lift and shift to EC2, best only done as part of a two-step migration, which is with a modernization shortage following it.
Yeah.
You will pay through the nose for being on EC2.
And also keeping Oracle up to date, doing all that hard work of basically having a DBA look after that database on EC2, whereas RDS, a lot easier to... Sorry, this gentleman was first.
So when we have doing the migration from Oracle to the AWS, the primary issues are coming around the logs and the binary
Yes.
logs, or the handling around that.
I didn't mention that. I've actually got a note about that. Apparently DMS performance degrades with large object data.
I have two more questions.
No, that's fine.
With the logs and the binary logs, the main problem is coming when we have to, AWS is handle only the primary keys.
Yep.
Or the primary indexes. They have not come in with the secondary indexes and the secondary, like I have creating some views.
Yep.
I'm using some Oracle Stream kind of things, and I have some dashboards running in AWS. All are not working well.
Is that not supported by DMS, or is it that...
When we have done the real migrations from AWS, Oracle to the AWS,
Yep.
when the third problem is coming regarding the optimizations,
Yep.
where we have to the baselines of I have inside Oracle, I have a SGA. That features I don't get into the RDS.
Yeah.
Or the Aurora.
Yeah, you can't control that.
Yeah, so that's kind of thing where I have to be. Third is like I have a full control, like I have some financial databases where I'm handling like critical or the very sensitive data over there. then I have in the DR setup.
Yes.
This is an active or that one. That is RDS just give me that kind of things, read replicas and all that. The live syncs is getting always having problematic.
Right.
I come to see. Then the fourth one, how we can resolve that, the Oracle Hexadata kind of product, which is giving me extremely high performance.
Right.
What is the option for me here? I can utilize that AWS one.
I think the short answer is for the first couple of questions is it sounds like your application is customized enough or is custom enough that the first step should be EC2 rather than RDS because you've got specific things.
But in an EC2, if I go with the Oracle licensing,
Yep.
it's going to be cost me almost near to double if I'm not using the reserve capacity of the EC2 instances
Yep.
for a year or 2 year or 3
Yes,
years.
correct.
That licensing cost is the problem. Then I have already like Oracle Cloud is available, which gives me the smoother.
Sure.
performance. Why should I have moved to AWS?
I don't think, I think there is certainly horses for courses. Certainly Oracle products can be quite specific in the way that they run. They want certain environments, and like SGA needs as much memory as it possibly can. I would say that would form part of your return on investment. If you're looking at custom features in your initial analysis of what you need to do, then you would start looking at, okay, can I do this in RDS? And then say, well, we can't, so we're going to have to go back and do this.
Actually, this has happened. We have already migrated everything to the EC2
Yep.
for the Oracle, and then we did not satisfy getting more cost, and then we are back again.
Absolutely. And
It sounds like you're probably on Oracle Enterprise on RAC.
No, I'm working in AWS for the last 10 years, and I was Oracle Apps DBA, so that's why
No, but your workload was Oracle Enterprise.
was it RAC?
Yes.
RAC.
Yeah.
And so in doing the assessment, working out enterprise features that are not supported, particularly if your target was an IDS, and a question of what flavour, I mean, for any Oracle enterprise, the target state, if you're going to move away from Oracle, is probably Aurora, probably close to it. There's a big question of what enterprise features your application is currently making use of that you could then transform out. And it's not there's no easy path for that. It is a lot of work. DMS and SET and all the automated tools are
DMS
General.
limited in what they can
Yeah.
do.
Especially with the binary logs, DMS fails.
Yeah, it would be, I'm guessing your workload was much too large.
Yep. Well, if you had RAC, you're probably in that sort of different enterprise level anyway, because most of the RAC customers that I know of are sort of really working that database up pretty hard.
Under the AWS hat, and how we satisfy the customer to the next? What we can do?
They'll have a service offer. Oracle will have a service offering, and I think it should be part of that planning. If you're doing something like that, the first step is this going to give me my return on investment? Is it worthwhile? Like, if you're looking at your EC2 instance versions versus RDS, you would evaluate that as part of the planning. And you can get that, all that information is freely available from AWS. The specifics of RAC, the specific performance type that it needs, the specific structures that it needs are very different.
Depending on how much control you've got over
Yeah.
the target application. If you were like
That
a
is fine with the technical side people, but when I go to for the pre-sales level, Oracle is having typical mindset users, which is using from years, and when we have go and try to put the
Yeah.
proposal on that,
Yeah, and I suppose it depends on how much control you've got over the application. If you've got limited ability to change the underlying application to remove the Oracle features, then OCI on AWS is probably a good target candidate for that. Run the Oracle on AWS in an Oracle license environment
Yep.
and minimize the licensing pain. In that sense, you're not getting out of your Oracle. You are buying more Oracle, but on AWS, so you get some of the features of the AWS platform and retain the features of Oracle. But it kind of depends on what the goal of the migration
Yep.
is as well, right? If your goal is truly to not have Oracle licensing, then doing a detailed analysis on all of the features that you need to remove as part of your migration is kind of the only way to do it, and then working through that. If you're hitting all of those issues, it's probably with a partner, with AWS. James is sitting at the back of the room, Amazon. AWS is pretty keen to get involved in cases where you aren't successful in those migrations and remove the roadblocks.
Yep.
But it's, without knowing the details of your specific migration challenges, it's hard to comment on exactly the path forward. There definitely are paths forward for large enterprise workloads.
Yeah, particularly for custom hardware like rack. Yeah, it's a different beast. If it was just a standard sort of environment, it might be different. But yeah, that's highly customized to run Oracle. So
I'd also say, have you got enterprise support as well? Could you go and work with an AWS representative to get hold of the Oracle team to see what support you can get from AWS? Just with tooling and hosting they're offering. Maybe I could get some insights there.
and it's also, as I mentioned on one of them, professional services are there for a reason. If there's something that you want to do and you're not sure if AWS can do it.
I'd start with support.
Yeah, oh yeah, actually support.
Start with AWS support.
Then go to the professional services.
Yeah.
Then that the customer is going to the direct to the professional services. It's not coming to the partners.
No, but they'll,
No, I would go to the AWS account team who's supporting the migration, and go to support first. They may turn around and say, well, actually, and as a partner, they might turn around and say, well, like, there's a challenge there, and there's a specific person in ProServe who knows how to fix that, and so they might talk to a partner and say, well, do you want to borrow a person? They might just turn around and put you in touch with the service team, right? It kind of depends on the exact challenge that you hit. But definitely working with your...
don't give up on AWS
partner,
just yet.
Working with your partner support team and as a partner working with the customer's AWS field team, they are definitely incentivized to make the migration successful. They don't want to see it fail. And I really wish you swapped that around. For all the partners in the room.
Sorry.
All the partners first.
Sorry. I slipped. There was a question just
My
there.
question was more like a follow-up in the licensing. Like, do they require like dedicated cost or something like that, or they allow you to run any kind of cost when you do EC2?
You can definitely do it without dedicated costs. It kind of depends on the license features you've
Yeah,
got.
like I'm more familiar with like Windows licenses with extra than Oracle.
Yeah, it depends on what's in the licensing agreement. The general statement is you could theoretically do it with on-demand shared tenancy as well, but it really depends on
Use case.
what you're migrating, how you're migrating it, and use cases. Definitely on shared tenancy, it's going to be the most expensive option.
That's for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Can you use something like AWS to set up a read-only replica in AWS while keeping your on-prem stuff running, just so that you use that almost as a pilot, just to read the data out of it?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yes, that's definitely possible.
You talk about all the tools that AWS gives you for migration. Do those tools also do your integrity testing and reporting? Or do you have to get another tool to do that?
Some of the there will be compliance information available in AWS, or with all the tools that you're using. If it's things like pen tests or things like that.
No, from a data integrity, it's more a question of, I had a big blob of data on the left,
Yep.
I've got a big blob of data on the right.
Yep.
How do I prove that every
Okay.
column, every row, every table is the same? Does AWS have a tool for that?
So we haven't talked about moving the actual applications as part of this.
No.
And MGN and Migration Factory have a tool chain to be able to do the application level validation. DMS, when you do DMS migration,
It has something
does
there.
do some validation and checking.
Yeah.
Would I trust it?
Yeah, it's like
No.
using the building floor to measure the
And I
integrity.
would definitely do my own
Okay,
tests.
right.
Yeah.
Especially for like Indian changes and stuff.
Yeah.
Doing an Indian change.
Yeah,
But-
the tools that you will use, like, it depends if you're doing block level migration.
Yeah.
Or level migration, right? So then, based on the answer to that, it's still put some sort of verification over the top of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you'll still have your standard replication, but it's over the, yeah. It's almost like, super checksums or something like that. Whatever you need to do to make yourself confident that that data is there.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like pilot / rehearsal
Yeah.
coming to it.
Yep.
And particularly,
Confidence by doing it multiple times before the
yeah,
weekday.
particularly for large amounts of data, because that's the other thing, is if there's some sort of interruption, like you've got particular structures that are taking much longer than you expect, or there's something happens to the network, then you want to make sure you can start that again. You don't want to go, oh, we've got to go right back to the beginning now.
Yeah, and if one of the tests you're doing is an endian change, make sure the source of your test didn't also change endian. From experience.
That's very specific.
Very large migration fail.
I just had a question, Paul. Like, you picked up in your talk, really awesome, very well thought out. Thank you. You mentioned 2 months. You gave a time frame, or somewhere in your talk a little bit about, how long it would take to rehost. I'm just curious. I might have just picked up on that.
It depends.
Any idea on time frames? I know it's hard, but I would think maybe 2 months is probably not enough time.
Oh, no, I was just, I put 2 months basically to give you fudge factor. So if your Oracle license renews in August, then you don't want to do everything up until July. You want to make sure that you've got some fudge factor there to make sure everything's ready to go, and then you start.
And as a rough idea, we talk, think about the planning up front, the execution, and then the post-execution monitoring that you do. That could be quite a lengthy process.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 2 to 3 months for talk about the database only. If you aren't changing anything about the application, 2 to 3 months is pretty good. What I will say from doing lots of migrations, time is the worst enemy for migration and modernization projects. There's a trade-off between spending lots of time doing the exercise and being careful versus how much risk and entropy you add to the environment by stretching the migration out. And so when you start to go into saying, oh, we're going to get the data up if you're doing CDC or something, and you have to keep that process running, how much risk do you start introducing by not upgrading your engines while the CDC is running and not doing other patching and blocking other processes? And
Yep.
so it's, in the context of your business, working out how much time we can take to do it safely, as safe as possible, without interrupting everything else and leaving the workload in this perpetual limbo state to do the migration. And so there is a point at which you go, oh, actually that's kind of too long for a simple migration.
Cool. And I had a follow-up question you touched on. If you rehost and you cut over, or maybe you introduce CDC, is there any tooling or that's available to tell you if there's what the differences might be between two hosts?
So
versus,
DMS does do CDC.
Okay.
So, and there might be other tools that you could use as well. It depends on what your workload is and the size. The size is probably the biggest issue, because that's got to be, what's your network bandwidth? Do you have direct connect?
Yeah.
What's the security of that? All of that. So,
So for Oracle to Oracle, DMS, DataGuard will tell you
yeah.
whether you've got change in your data and what needs to change to replicate it, and whether you need to do resynchronizations and bits and pieces. They're a good point. Don't necessarily trust only one tool for those things. probably have testing and verification tools as well. We've written a few internally for different use cases to do those kinds of things.
Sorry, another question.
Besides unit test, do you use other tests?
So unit tests for the database.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. It's if you're testing, what are you wanting to test? The functionality or?
I think what he's trying to say is that there's a whole plate of tests that you can do. Of course, unit test is one of them.
Oh yes.
What are the tests that you kind of through?
Well, I think so. Yeah, unit tests, performance tests, security, all of those other things that you would be wanting to make sure that the data is there, it's clean, you don't have to do anything with it, and it's there ready to go. The other thing too is setting up your backups and replicas and things like that, so that you've got a solid base right from the get-go. So if there's any issues at all, you can roll back to those issues. That's one of the things that talked about. Does that sort of answer the question, or is there something more about the testing, specific testing that you're after?
That answers my question.
Oh, good. Thank you. Anything else?
Have you or has anyone tried using any kind of Gen AI
To do a migration?
question? Sorry, can I ask a question? So kind of curious, particularly around things like stored props.
Yeah.
We mucked around a bit.
That's what I'm
We mucked around a bit internally with some modernization of some stemmer objects. We haven't actually pushed the generated code for that out. We're just mucking around to see how much, like, where it sits comparable to a developer and SCT doing schema conversions and other bits and pieces. It's looking promising. I think the biggest challenge for using any of those tools is we're finding with clients test coverage. If they don't have comprehensive test coverage, and ideally automated test coverage, testing the functionality that we're having an agent rewrite, I'm pretty dubious of letting anything change that code, and so I think the next interesting place to look at is going in and getting the agents to write the test coverage first, making sure that it functions in place happily, and then we'll start looking at a bit more autonomous.
Most people's automated test coverage of stored procedures is pretty low. Like, you might be finding it.
No, it's pretty low.
I've got an interesting one here, which basically says Oracle migrations are 70% project management, 20% technical execution, and 10% luck. Luck.
It's a good way to run back your talk there, Paul. You needed a meme for that, I've also.
All good?
Yeah, brilliant.
Nothing? Good. Thank you for coming. Hope you thought it was good.